Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I see all along in here. I'm mad at you. Put that link up there. I've never even heard of Amazon books called the Forbidden List or whatever. Oh my gosh. You know, you're feeding into my addiction. That is not okay. So I'm just teasing. All right, SR71, I'm going to bring you up for your co-hosting debut as Bridget flights in here. Yep, I got you, Bridget. I sent you the link, and we're going to be training SR71 as a co-host. I just threw you the invite, SR71, so let me know when you get it. Yep, there you go. All right. So, Bridget, is there anything you want to share with him before we get started?
The Nutter Butter thing is totally off the hook. Did you see it?
The what?
Sorry. No, this is crazy. Okay. Yeah. No, I think SR is awesome.
Okay.
But there's Nutter Butter. Okay. Test Dummy shared a post. Nutter Butter is posting brain posts and even weirder TikTok videos. Like,
who are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. On X, there's just, anyway, I reposted them. So after this page, if you guys want to, there's just something weird going on at the company that makes Nutter Butter.
Okay, that's better. Now I'm tracking with you. Okay, now go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Okay, the company that on X, the company that makes Nutter Butters is posting some very strange posts, like help, 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 and then they post some TikTok videos that are very bizarre, leaning towards the cult-ish kind of thing. Okay, so that's all I got to say, and that's just great. You know, when you think you've seen it all and they can't get any weirder, clean this Nutter Butters, for Pete's sake. Anyway.
Okay. Come in here with Nutter Butter, and I have no clue what you're talking about. So they are created by Mondelez International, which is a company based in Chicago. Anytime I hear Chicago, the hair on the back of my neck stands up.
Right.
So yeah, they are part of an international company.
Nabisco subsidiary.
It says, yeah.
Anyway, there's I'm sure something is going to come of this. So, because apparently it just didn't start today. It has been going on for.
So, oh my gosh, it's a Belgium company. That Dirk van der Put is a Belgium's, he's the CEO of the company, of the international, and he is from the Antwerp area, which he worked for Coca-Cola, Mars, all kinds of different, God, I had no idea there was a McCain Food Limited in Canada that he used to work for.
What?
Yeah. He's also a director at Mattel.
What?
So
the CIA has its own. Just about the CIA has its own. Well, I guess I didn't be shocked, right?
Yeah. He actually has dual citizenship, both Belgium and US. They've had controversy with child labor complaints, and also I guess he got attacked by for doing business in Russia, and he would not stop doing business in Russia, and so he come under attack for that. But anyway, all right, sidetrack.
Yep. Sorry.
That's okay. No, that's we're all about current events here, so
Right.
we kind of do both.
Right.
And I will be this evening doing my second installment of our book review. And also, I'm going to do a short video on a really freaky thing that I found. That's just kind of one of those quote unquote coincidences that when you go back and you look at things that you probably know very well with Gladio glasses on it, all of a sudden it looks completely different. So I want to share one of those. We'll do that on a separate video as well over on the Rumble channel. So I will announce when that's going to go live. We will do it live. And if you can later on, it'll be this evening. Come and join us. Okay, so we're going to go ahead with our Indonesia story lesson, not a story. It's the story, not a story, maybe. All right, so the next area deals with, we talked about the Netherlands, New Guinea, the Papua New Guinea. So we're going to talk about the Papua, Papua portion of the Indonesia right now. And back in 1941, the Japanese Imperial Army was very interested in this area because of oil wells. And they wanted to gain control of the resource-rich island of New Guinea. And it basically was more than twice the area of the islands of Nippon, Nippon, which was part of the Japanese island area. Indonesia is by far the largest country in Southeast Asia, both in population and in area. Indonesia covers almost 1/7 of the circumference of the globe. It is overly abundant in many natural resources. And for over 3.5 centuries, 350 years, it was a Dutch colonial colony. And much of the Dutch wealth originated from their colonialization of Indonesia. 17,000 islands were once described as the belt of emeralds slung around the equator. And the 3 of the major 5 islands intersect with the equator. The other 2, Java and Papua, are entirely in the southern hemisphere. In the eastern extremity of the Netherlands East Indies territory was the territory of Netherlands, New Guinea. Nowadays, the 2 provinces are generally called the Papuas. As a big territory, which was larger than California, only the western half of the island of New Guinea was considered the Netherlands, part of the Netherlands East Indies. In 1950, it was virtually untouched. The wilderness, rainforest, highland valleys, mountains, 10,000-foot mountains, some higher than that. Basically, a central mountain range created like a backbone effect on the island. 16,000 feet was the highest. And let's see, for many decades, couple of centuries, it was just marked Dutch on the map, not even like subordinate names, just referred to as Dutch territory. Ships would go there for coconuts, water. Up to World War II, only 5% of the territory was under the colonial administration. And this is the thing we were talking about yesterday, where 95% of it was not under Dutch control. The NNG, the Netherlands, New Guinea, was sparsely populated by black-skinned inhabitants who were dubbed Malaysian, Black Island, Malaysian, by a Melanesian, Melanesian. There you go. Today, they're better known as Papuans. In both halves of the island, the bulk of the Papuans population lived in remote highland valleys, free of malaria. The system of agriculture practiced for centuries there was very advanced and well developed. Compared to the best farming techniques located between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in the Middle East, these guys were like the Einstein of farming techniques. The eastern half of New Guinea was claimed by two imperial colonial powers, Germany and Britain, while the Dutch in the western half simply added the territory to its existing colonial possession, the East Indies. An arbitrary colonial line was drawn down the middle of the island, creating the two halves. Pre-World War II development in the Dutch territory was meager, left a small dozen colonial settlements scattered around the coastline. So just to drive the point home, you have this big island. They, on a map, drew a line, but only 5% of it was ever in these small little areas along the coastline, ever under Dutch control, regardless of what the map showed. There was a cluster of army encampments at the start of the 20th century in response to the U.S. gaining control of nearby Philippines, so they can control their stashes of resources. When the U.S. giant company Standard Oil was still inseparable from the name Rockefeller, it initiated a takeover for the Dutch oil interest in the Indies. The Dutch responded by joining forces with the British in 1907 to form Royal Dutch Shell. This started decades of pressure from the Rockefeller in order to try to take over these resources. Ultimately, in May of 1935, with the formation of the Netherlands New Guinea, the NNG Petroleum Company, which had a 60% controlling U.S. interest of Standard Oil. So, after pestering them for the better part of 25 years, Standard Oil finally, with the help of Sullivan and Cromwell, got into the partnership with Royal Dutch Shell and their resources in Indonesia. They formed what is called NNGPM. This is a joint venture that was orchestrated by Allen Dulles. It was formed with the approval of Sir Henry Detering, Deterding, who was the general manager of Royal Dutch Shell Group of companies. Detering and Rockefeller had long been fierce opponents in the global oil business. When Allen joined his brother John Foster in Sullivan and Cromwell, their first big case in 1928 brought him face to face with Detering, who had somewhat of a he reminded people of Napoleon, and but somehow, and probably based on intelligence that Alan Dulles was able to collect, he was able to needle his way into this company on behalf of his benefactors, the Rockefellers and Standard Oil. In the 1930s, Dulles and Dietering shared a common interest, the new leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler. Alan Dulles wasted no time in arranging to speak with Hitler personally, soon after he came to power in 1933. He also met Goebbels, who, like Dulles, was born with a club foot. That's interesting. With remarkably accurate political foresight, after interviewing Hitler, Alan predicted that Poland would be Germany's Kazabali, like their entrance into the World War II. Dietering's friendship with Hitler led to million-dollar donations. So, again, they are basically sponsoring Hitler, just so that you can be clear on what we're saying here, because that dovetails with the whole Anthony Sutton book that we read way back when on the Wall Street and Hitler connection. However, the key elements that swayed Dutch opinion in the formation of the NNG-PM partnership was evidence that Japanese units were secretly conducting oil exploration in the New Guinea territory. Without Americans' assistance, the Dutch could do little to assert their colonial power. Dulles used that political tension generated by Japanese to make the deal and gave the US, because they were going to be the firepower behind keeping the Japanese in check, 60%. So just think about what I just said. This is shortly after Hitler comes to power in the mid-1930s, okay? Alan Dulles is using the threat of the potential going to war with Japan, which just coincidentally happens. And why was that? Oh, because they cut off the oil. And who controls all of the oil? Standard Oil and the British Dutch Royal Company. Do you see how that all works? So Alan Dulles is bartering, and he's using the fear of the Japanese. It's like they're controlling everything. Everything's being manipulated. New Guinea was the goal of Japan's march to the south. Admiral Maeda and Japanese naval intelligence had been looking at where else to go after having already been plundering China and many of the other areas around there. Following the U.S. advice, Netherlands Indies government denied the request by Japan to increase the volume of oil being provided to Japan because the U.S. had cut them off. All right. So after the Pacific War, geologists attached to General MacArthur remained in the Dutch territory for most of the next decade, conducting exploration. Only some of their findings were ever released, such as the nickel discovered on Gag Island, being 10% of the world's nickel reserves. There was no mention of any of the gold deposits that we know exist, because they were found in 1930s. During the dispute over sovereignty, neither Dulles nor the Dutch political hierarchy would admit that there's gold in Indonesia. Both Dulles and the Dutch hierarchy knew about the gold, copper, and oil, but there was no such motive behind any of the dealings of the Indonesian people themselves because they were never told. They don't know anything about what they're sitting on. During the 1950s, Alan Dulles' strategy took shape and Indonesia became a central part of his plan. It also obviously is going to put him at odds with President Kennedy. Dulles very early recognized the significance of Indonesia for both the political destiny in Southeast Asia and the Cold War. After 1949, the Dutch announced a plan to develop NNG and bring the indigenous people to independence. An Indonesian campaign to oust the remnant colonial Dutch presence in New Guinea began in early 1950s, claiming the territorial extent of Indonesia was from the Sabang Island, Sabang, on the western extremity of the Indonesian archipelago to Marauke, Merauke in the east, starting with the length of Sumatra, which is a distance of 3,350 miles. That's just huge. Which is basically the distance greater than New York to Dublin, Ireland. The campaign initially focused only on the colonial Dutch presence in New Guinea rather than the continuing Dutch presence in all of Indonesia. In newly independent Indonesia at the start of the 50s, the largest chunk of economic power was still mainly in Dutch hands. The agriculture, oil industry, shipping, aviation, banking, all that. So they give them their independence the same way we learned that they did it in Africa. Remember, like in the Congo, they say, "Oh, well, you're independent today, but you can't have the officer positions in your military. We're going to leave them as Belgium, but you can be all the enlisted people. Oh, and you can't have your resources over here. We're going to make that a separate country, so you have no resources at all." That's kind of the way they give them their independence. Sukarno often declared that the struggle for independence was ongoing and his revolution was not yet finished. U.S. sources, he did not, the foreign minister said that U.S. sources were providing covert funding for the Indonesian army to promote an anti-colonial campaign against NNG. In other words, the CIA was spurring them into divorcing the Dutch so they can plunder. And once they overthrow Sukarno, then they can have all of the hidden resources that are laying around. So after temporarily losing the Indies to Japan during the war, and then losing the Indies permanently to Indonesia in 1949, it was not until the 50s that the Dutch attempted to impose their stamp of colonial rule on the New Guinea territory. This brief period, because again, that's the part that they only had ever had little outpost on. So they're still kind of like trying to get their claws into some part of this. So with that in mind, Indonesia began acquiring a centralized army command and was making arms deals with the Soviet Union, which we already know is a kiss of death, because you're not allowed to do that. In the Netherlands, New Guinea, NNG, in 1936, this is the part where it goes back and it tells you, like I was telling you yesterday when we started this, how he jumps back in time. So he just set up the whole scenario. Polgren did. Now he's going to go back and I'm not going to spend as much time on this part. He's going to outline how the discovery happened of the gold. And I think for our purposes, the fact that it happened is the most important. But there are a couple of points that I do want to bring out. Um, he talks about in the 1920s that there was a lot of pressure on the colonial powers between like Germany and Japan and even America, uh, all dealing around oil and things like that, which pushed Standard Oil into the forefront of most of these arrangements, which again, because they were represented by Sullivan and Cromwell, made Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles in the middle of all of this. So there's a guy by the name of Jean-Jacques Dozy, D-O-Z-Y. He's a geologist. He also worked for the NNG Petroleum Company, this conglomerate that Allen Dulles put together. The Dutch share, as we said earlier, was 40%. The US share was held, but kind of in a covert way to make it 60%, because remember the bust up of Standard Oil. So you had what was called Standard Vacuum Oil and Standard Oil of California. And both of those two hold like 30 and 30, meaning Rockefeller held 60, but it looks like he doesn't. That was just a shenanigan to get around that. So the company that started the mining operations was the company we talked about yesterday, Freeport. Among the company directors was a Rockefeller, and it was let's see, and it was a Rockefeller that landed on the world's largest cable operated mining operation ever set up, because it's a very remote area where this is at. So it says Dozy basically was working and was faithful to the Dutch throne, not Standard Oil. And so when he went on his expedition, he was doing it as a faithful Dutch citizen. So you have the Netherlands East Indies, in the freedom phase, turning into Indonesia. And Dutch struggled to retain sovereignty of the NNG area. They lost it in 1962 to 1963 when they were forced to hand over the territory to Indonesia. This occurred because of the intervention of President Kennedy, who was responding to the political situation and the unrest there. But again, President Kennedy has no idea about the gold there. Both the Dutch and the Indonesians had claimed sovereignty of the territory, while in fact, the gold deposits had never been publicized. Both Sukarno and Kennedy remained unaware of the gold. At no time during the political struggle was gold ever mentioned. They did talk about the natural resources, but basically only ever talked about like timber and some of those types of resources. At the same time as the international sovereignty dispute was going on between the Netherlands and Indonesia, the Dutch were also in a dispute with the Americans, primarily the Rockefellers. But this never reached the public eye. The Rockefellers' interests used their connections inside the US government. One of those connections, of course, was Allen Dulles, whose clandestine activities would eventually oust the Dutch colonial presence from the territory completely. At the same time, Sukarno was officially claiming the territory after the Dutch departure in May 1963. Dulles was preparing for regime change of Sukarno. That began around 1965-ish. continued into 1966, and Sukarno was eventually replaced by Major General Suharto, Suharto. And Alan Dulles, once the Paris-based international lawyer working for Rockefeller Standard Oil, who arranged the joint venture of NNG-PM to be formed in 1935, which of course, you've got the Great Depression and a whole lot of dynamics going on during that time. The Indies Authority could no longer refuse Standard Oil's access to NNG as it had done prior to and after World War I. The long delay in gaining access was a reflection of the Dutch wariness of Rockefeller oil interest and their attempted takeover way back in 1907. The American pressure was fended off by their settled agreement. But in 1935, Rockefeller oil interest around the world, because at some point we'll cover this too. This is at the same time that Dulles is negotiating Azerbaijan oil fields and a whole bunch of other consolidation. So with each of these deals, Standard Oil becomes more and more prominent and more pariah. Again, he talks a lot about the expedition. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Basically, him and two other guys get this expedition together. They hike up the mountain, and they were basically mapping. They used kind of like what we saw, what they were doing in South America, where they were mapping all over. And during the mapping, they look for formations that tend to have rock formations and stuff like that, that are kind of telltale signs or hints that gold might be there. And then once they have that all mapped out, they go back and do geological treks into the area that they map in order to test the ground. And so basically that's what they've done. They drew maps. Once they decided to hike in, they used the same aircraft to drop supplies along their route in. So they lessened the amount of stuff that they were taking. And so the bottom line is that they make the discovery, and they refer to it as the El Dorado because of the high percentage of the gold to copper to ore that was found on this particular mountain. I mean, it was just, again, the mother lode of all mother lodes. And it says, a few years before the war erupted in Europe, Dozy's remarkable discovery was restricted to a few people in the upper echelons of the Dutch political figures. Discretion was demanded because of all the uncertainty of the war. Nobody knows how things are going to happen. And they make a lot of, I want to say this one thing. It's not going to make much sense here, but it will later. The gold concentration was stated to be only 1/15 of the actual gold concentration the first time that it was discussed. And this created a false impression of what the value of this gold mine was. During the war, 1945, or after the war, 1945 to 49, Indonesia's struggle for independence, there was even more reason not to divulge the discovery. NNG remained apart, separate from the Indonesians' independence struggle. It had been reclaimed by General MacArthur's troops before the Japanese surrender. It was excised from the Indies before 1949 when sovereignty of the Indies was handed over to Indonesia. So it's almost as if General MacArthur knows what's going on, which would make some sense. This started a 13-year dispute between the Dutch and the Indonesians over the sovereignty of the Dutch-occupied territory. The policy of concealment, a mutual agreement between Dutch and the NNGPM, continued throughout this dispute. The 60% American holdings in NNGPM played a crucial role in the final outcome. While the Dutch government and NNGPM seemed to work cooperatively in some aspects, like hiding the secret, government officials were unprepared for other covert methods that NNGPM used in support of the Indonesian aspirations to oust the Dutch from that territory. After the war, Dozy, the guy that discovered the gold, worked in South America. That's weird. Only when 2 decades of political wrangling was over, New Guinea sovereignty seemed to be an issue well in the past, did Dozy comment on his 1936 discovery that it was just like a mountain of gold on the moon, meaning how remote it was. It was not so much the remoteness that was in question, but the fact that he acknowledged that it was a mountain of gold, not of copper, of which you had a little bit of gold, but a mountain of gold, which lets you know that that 1/15 thing is a lie. Yet the policy of concealing the true concentration of gold did not stop. This policy had been started at the time of the discovery in 1936 and continued for decades. It did not stop in 1972 when the American mining company Freeport Indonesia began production. Of course, this was no longer a matter of concern for the Dutch, but for the Indonesian government then and now. 10 years later, after the mining began, Joseph Luns, Luns, a former Dutch foreign minister from 1952 to 1971 and NATO Secretary General from 71 to 84. Now keep in mind, NATO runs Operation Gladio, informed me, the author, in an interview in Brussels that the Dutch government had unsuccessfully tried to gain American support to mine the large outcrop of base metal ever located. The quote, the American companies had conversation with the Netherlands government, but were prevented by the American government from pursuing it with the argument that the Dutch would be out of it, unquote. So they're saying that Alan Dulles plans to get the Dutch out and not share. One of the American companies Luns was referring to was Freeport Sulphur, who is the owner of Freeport, Indonesia. While it may have been advised not to pursue any joint investment in NNG for political reasons, this does not imply such advice came as a result of any awareness on Kennedy's part of the El Dorado gold find. After Kennedy intervened, he wanted to follow up with the U.S. economic aid package and investment in Indonesia, because again, he didn't know they're sitting on like trillions of dollars in gold. He suggested a blue ribbon panel of bonded conservatives by setting up the Committee to Strengthen the Security of the Free World. That was the name of the committee. Freeport Sulphur was represented on the panel. Still, Kennedy had no idea what was going on. The committee, headed by General Lucius Clay. Now, I said that as we go through this, we're going to look these people up. Lucius Clay, because this guy comes up often in our Operation Gladio. Let's talk about Lucius Clay for just a second. Lucius Clay, Army, retired general, deputy to Dwight D. Eisenhower, general, in 1945. He was the deputy military governor of Germany, second to Eisenhower in the aftermath of World War II. So he was responsible for setting up the NATO Gladio units throughout Europe. He stayed there until 1949. He was part of the Berlin airlift. And let's see, he also, his dad was a U.S. senator. He was a close associate of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Sam Rayburn, and all of these guys are the ones that basically set up the New Deal. He also, let's see, there was another thing on here. I'm trying to find it. Hold on just a second. There was one other. So the other aspect of him being the governor, so when we, you hear me all the time correcting people when we talk about the Nuremberg trials, Clay was instrumental in them not being real. So basically, you see Clay reducing the sentence of Ilse Koch, who was referred to as the Beast of Buchenwald, who was convicted of murder in the Nuremberg trials. So he was like, yeah, that's not that big of a deal. So he reduced her sentence, sorry. And he intervened in several other ways in the Nuremberg trials. And let's see. I was thinking there was one other thing. Oh, yeah, he was a member of the Society of the Cincinnati. That was one of those kind of secret societies that I did a whole post on that. He was a member of he was the chairman for the Crusade for Freedom, which is one of those CIA funded nonprofits that had to do with Radio Free Europe and those types of things. So this guy is lock, stock, and barrel part of the Operation Gladio infrastructure. He also set as board members on things like the American Red Cross, let's see, this Continental Can Company. I've come across this a couple of different times. There's lots of questions about it. The National Committee for a Free Europe, another one of those NATO CIA front companies. So again, 100% Operation Gladio material. So that's what we need to know about him. So he gets put in charge of this committee of JFK's that was the Committee to Strengthen the Security of the Free World. They really were not interested in doing that at all. It was also, the other people on there were international lawyers like the Sullivan and Cromwell crowd, bankers, and basically the board members of companies like Freeport, who were interested in going and hawking all of the resources out of Indonesia. Also, The guy that was representing Freeport on that commission was Robert Lovett, and we've come across him too. Lovett. So there you have it. Okay, so while Kennedy is acting in good faith and not being privy to any of the information, you have all of these other vultures hovering around ready to pounce. During the 1982 interview with NATO Secretary General Luns, the author was joined for a few minutes by Mr. Van Kampen, Kampen, who was head of the private office, which was about 15 meters from where the two of these guys are talking. And they have this conversation that is very interesting, that basically seems like, well, let me just read it because it's very interesting, and it's going to drive to the heart of something that gets disclosed probably tomorrow. Luns, and these are quotes from them. I knew, and most people knew, that there were some gold there, but we thought of the gold as being of relatively small quantity and not easy to mine. That's a bold-faced lie. Polgren, the author, returns with, let me say that when Freeport made an analysis of the gold, they confirmed that the gold was 15 grams per ton, which confirmed the 1949 report, which was done by the Dutch government, and the report from 1936, which he brings to the interview, and he's like throwing them out there. And let's see, wouldn't you say that gold of this quality and quantity, 15 grams per ton of ore, when the ore is the largest outcrop ever discovered in the world, might have a significant influence in the New Guinea dispute? Lund says, no, because if it had any impact, either the Indonesians or the Americans, and this other guy comes from the outer office to cut him off, Van Kampen, and says, I happen to know something about gold. Even at that time, it was very difficult to produce gold, which was commercially marketable. And moreover, I would add that this being an argument that generally in Holland would be a negative argument. Lund said, that means counterproductive. Van Kampen continues, yes, counterproductive. Lund then says, anything which smells of profit, Van Kampen again cuts him off and says, everybody would have heard about it if that's the argument that you're going to be using. Polgren said, it could also have been a very good reason for the severity of the dispute. And they cut him off again and basically say at the same time, developed, which means the vocal affirmation of both Luns and Van Kampen together for an instant seemed like they were jointly declaring that the same ulterior motive that had driven the Dutch government's effort to keep control of the territory, and then they fell silent, as if they knew that they had given up the ghost. Evidence throughout the 90-minute interview was Lund's dislike for President Sukarno, but in his final summary, he left no doubt about the ultimate arbitrator of Dutch sovereignty. Quote, the economic argument was no argument for the Dutch. The only argument was legal argument, arguments of the interest of the population and the principle of self-determination. Otherwise, the Dutch Houses of Parliament would never have supported me. We finally gave up the territory when it became certain that the Americans would not give us the beginning of assistance. So he's trying to make the argument they did it out of the goodness of their heart because the Americans were insisting upon it, and they were just going to be gentlemanly about it, which is not what happened at all. After Freeport gained access to Dozy's discovery, they described the deposit as copper with silver and some gold. When if you were going to put them in proportion to the find, they would be exactly the opposite. Gold with a little bit of copper and silver. The export tonnages stated in the annual reports confirmed this deception. This also raises another question about concealment. While the initial pre-war concealment had its own valid reason, the validity had expired decades ago. The true concentration of gold was known by two parties, the Dutch officials, to include the royal family, and the executives of NNGPM. So after Freeport mining began in 1972, what arrangement was made with the Dutch hierarchy involved the initial concealment to participate in a long-term concealment. And another interesting aspect of this whole thing is Dozy left a time capsule because they were in a very remote area. They had hiked into this in 1935. They didn't know if they were going to make it out alive. And this is not the only like mineral discovery that I've read about that people do this. So what they do is they bring like a time capsule, especially the real remote areas, and they will write down whatever and put it in the time capsule. So if 50 years from now somebody rediscovers his discovery, they know that he was the one that discovered it. So if they die or whatever, so he does that time capsule back in 1936. Well, it dawns on these people that, oh shit, we've been hiding this secret, and his freaking time capsule is up there on the top of this mountain. And so whenever they do go in to get the discovery, they're going to know we knew. And we've been lying to everybody the entire time. So they have to scramble around. And there was a big expedition up to go retrieve this notebook. And this guy that does it, so Dozy basically described where he left it, but everything had changed. Where the snow line was had changed. Different trees had felled since then. And so 26 years had gone by, and this guy has to go find it. He says, finally, he found the time capsule, and inside the zinc tin was Dozy's notebook. According to his fellow climbers, who informed me that Harrer, Harrer, the guy that went up to get it, had placed great importance on relocating this time capsule. He then kept it very much to himself. Harrer's own account of retrieving the notebook in the book he published in 1962 about the expedition, Harrer commented, quote, pages were damp and stuck together, but to strike gold could hardly have been more exciting, unquote. So they get the incriminating evidence off the mountain before they have to turn it over and be discovered for being duplicitous. So, obviously, the former Dutch Prime Minister, Peter Gerbrandy, his last name is spelled Gerbrandy. When the government, he was the Dutch Prime Minister when they were in London during World War II. And in 1950s, Gerbrandy was a founding member of the Foundation for the Preservation of the Realm, which another author says kept insisting on the economic wealth of West New Guinea in spite of overwhelming evidence that they had no economic wealth. despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. He says in one report, the spectacular claim of wealth in gold and uranium have been strongly discounted. There is no evidence that there is uranium, but there's plenty of gold. The two natural resources that abound in West New Guinea is timber and a large reserve of hydraulic energy. And that's just a bold-faced lie, and they know it. In the 1950s, the Dutch people were still adjusting to the loss of the Netherlands East Indies. The Dutch parliament, in refusing to relinquish sovereignty over the New Guinea territory, was yet to gauge the full extent of opposition to its continued colonial presence. As the dispute with Indonesia gathered momentum, no mention of Dozy's discovery was ever mentioned. President Sukarno's political priorities and other factors had nothing to do with gold. Dozy's gold discovery would only have detracted from the Dutch's argument in the international arena for retaining it, because everybody would know that they're gold whores, and was going to be stealing the property, even though that's exactly what they were doing. They just didn't want anybody to know about it. And the bigger point of why I wanted to go through this book with you guys is the extent to which these effers will lie to us. No one in the Netherlands had a freaking clue that they had a colony and was sitting on a gold mine. Why? Because they had no intent, and you will see this as we go on, to share that gold with the people. They're going to be stealing it, even after not the Dutch, the US. There's a transfer of wealth that's going to happen because we've all been lied to the entire time. And we can't fathom all the shit that we've been lied to about. And so when I find a different way that they've lied to us about something else, I'm going to spend the time to bring that information to you guys, so that we question everything. Things that our brain would like, why would they even lie about that? You need to know they're lying. Okay. So they're in it supposedly for the goodness of the people and what they can bring to the people. They're in it for the gold. That's the bottom line of this portion of it. Shortly before the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, the geological report, the Dozy report, was basically limited because of the chance of war. And he goes through the extent to which this was hidden. And all of the different ways that it was concealed. In one thing he said, with his, there was a picture of a black mountain of ore that he had discovered in 1936. Dozy looked at the author and said, "This is gone now completely," meaning that's where the gold mountain was. Freeport had mined the entire outcrop and was now digging a giant hole in the earth to extract even more. Dozy says, quote, "It was all ore, the largest outcrop in the world. The concentration of copper in the rock is the essential thing. All other large mines in the world have, in general, a lower copper content than this one. This one happens to have a pretty high copper content," unquote. The Freeport director and geologist Forbes Wilson, a friend of Dozy's, had published an account of how Freeport came to mine this find. The title he gave it was The Conquest of Copper Mountain, because it's not copper, it's gold. They lie about everything. Dozy showed me a copy of the book that Wilson had given him 1 year before. In Wilson's words, quote, "Dozy had no inkling of it in 1936, but the mountain later turned out to be the largest known above ground copper deposit 33 million tons of high-grade copper ore worth about $1 billion in 1980 prices, unquote. Had Forbes Wilson been even half honest with the details about the gold potential of the mountain, it would have cost the mining company considerably more in the set payments they were making to the Indonesian government, because they are stealing from the Indonesian government based on these falsified reports. Forbes was even referring to this when he said, quote, below ground copper deposits were recently discovered nearby that ultimately may turn out to be 5 or more times as much copper as the mountain they're currently mining, unquote, which basically means they found another gold mine. The ore, mined at 10,000 feet up the mountain, was carried in an aerial tramway spanning more than 1,600 yards to a concentrating mill 80 at the 8,000 foot level. The copper, silver, gold was then pumped in slurry form through a pipeline for 68 miles downhill to the southern coastline, to be stockpiled and shipped to Japan and Germany for sale. Again, Japan and Germany. You know, the losers. Before the Freeport mine commenced production, the copper content was estimated to be 2.5%. But the 1973 company report in the first year increased that to 3.5%. The copper concentrates shipped abroad roughly were about 30%, in contrast to the 26% originally. So it's got a higher content level, is the point. Even this proved to be an understatement when the head of Freeport office in Cairns provided further details in 1979. From Cairns, the remote Freeport mine is serviced by sea once every 10 days and by air several times a week. The Freeport offices there revealed in a personal conversation that the average copper content was 5%, which is double the original estimate. The copper slurry concentrate was in excess of 40%. When they asked about the amount of gold, he basically said, more than all the running cost. There's so much gold. This comment was regarded as a serious breach and resulted in him being fired, because you're not allowed to say that. Dozy's attention back in 1939 at the report, what he reported with his geological survey, was that copper content was high, but also revealed gold content may prove to be considerable. That was his actual words. It was not so much that the copper content as to the, but the gold content, which is what made it so amazing. Quote, there are gold containing copper ores. A Dr. Slotting investigated these ores, and the reader is referred to his article. It said on page 83, there was a note of thanks for proofreading the text. Now, this is going to get very confusing, but this is critical. The way they concealed the amount of gold was by the use of a G and a GR. The use of G is grams, and grains are GR. It's done one way in English and the exact opposite way in Dutch. And so when they translated the documents, they translated it so that it looked like the lesser of the two in each of the pamphlets that they were printing about this gold find. So in other words, if it was going to be in America, whichever the difference is, that's the lower, that's the way it was going to be translated in the United States, whether it was grams or grains. And then the exact opposite happened in the Dutch translation. So they would go to that extent to lie about the gold find. So there's a lot of talk in here about the 15 grams versus 15 grains and the amount of difference that that makes when you're reporting the amount of gold, because at some point there's going to be an accounting, and when those slurries that are being shipped down the mountain gets looked at, they are basically siphoning off gold going somewhere based on this sleight of hands. So we'll stop there. The next stop is a conversation between Dosie's neighbor and family friend, and how Professor Polgrain, I mean, the man's amazing, how he kind of tripped them up and got confirmation of what he was saying. So we're going to start there tomorrow. And we're also going to discover a connection that I found completely separate, and that's of Dulles' relationship with the De Morgenchild, George, the star witness in the JFK Assassination Commission, the Warren Commission. And Polgrain, much to his credit, found out a lot more details that's going to blow your mind. And so we'll finish up with the Dozie gold find part of it. And then we're going to do another kind of deep dive into Dulles and De Morgenchild, because it ties into all of this, and how it comes kind of full circle. So it's an amazing little road that we're going to go down over the next couple of days. So anyway, I'm going to open it up for questions. If anybody has any, please feel free to request a mic.
It is just incredible how much gold they pilfered out of there. By your estimation, since they're admitting to a certain degree, how much do you think they even took?
I honestly, I don't know, because if you and there will be a little bit more detail tomorrow, but if you look at it has to be, in today's value, trillions of dollars. What I think is the most fascinating about this is the way, obviously, that they've stolen the wealth of the world. These people, and I keep making this comment, these people, excuse me for you guys that are on Rumble, because I'm starving. These people have not only stolen the wealth from all of these countries, but part of this wealth stealing was used for Operation Gladio, for the funding. So what I find most fascinating, and I did a short interview on Badlands Media this morning with Ghost of Bass Patrick Henry and CanCon, and I'll make this statement again. What I find most interesting, that tells me things have changed in a positive way, is they had access to all of these resources, all of the money, and now, so they never had to worry about appropriated funds. The CIA, you would be hard pressed to find the CIA ever speaking out about funding, other than asking for a new building or whatever. They didn't need funding. They had front companies, they had drug sales, they had all of this stuff. Well, starting about 3 years ago, the CIA got very vocal in funding. The last 2 years, since 2022, they were screaming for money to go to Israel and Ukraine, like screaming for money to go there. And that was very odd. And of course, we know that Ukraine is money laundering as Israel weapons launders. The money going in there supplies, weapons trafficking all over. So it's just very interesting that there has been a significant kind of shift since we spend most of our time discovering how, what nation they've stole what from, that somehow they don't seem to have access to that anymore. Let's see. Lord Interweb. What you got?
Colonel, can you hear me? This is Miles. I've been elevated to a lord.
Okay, Miles, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Don't you hate it when you're in the morning chat and you get called out to come on to the show?
No, I love it.
I was laughing so much. I went, oh my God, what, did she have makeup on? So,
I did not, as you could see. What I did in the interim was I ran and got a hat, because I don't know if you guys know anything about the weather in Florida. It is so humid here right now. I went out yesterday with straight hair and I came back with my hair being about 3 inches big. So I have very curly hair, but I normally wear it straight, but it takes maintenance in order to get it straight. And the humidity here is out of this world. So when they said that, I DM'd CanCon and I'm like, give me 5 minutes. So I ran and got a hat.
Well, yeah, I was wondering if you were to come on the show, and I said, I'm going to bring it up in the afternoon anyway and talk to you about it. But this is just my other account, my alt account of John Paul Jones. You probably recognize him. I've yet begun to fight. Carry on, Colonel.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Good afternoon, guys. I said it yesterday. I'm going to say it again today. Like, this is the gold aspect and the numbers is probably my favorite part of this book so far. I still haven't finished it, but I want everybody here to consider what happened just under a decade after all this gold was siphoned out of Indonesia. Is that we broke the gold peg and allowed for the U.S. dollar to be printed flippantly against the price of gold, and the fact that it shot up, it absolutely rocketed in price after that was done, shortly after, and it allows for massive amount of funding for all these initiatives. Like you mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but I don't think any of us are really capable of really imagining just how much economic purchasing power, stealing all this gold just out of Indonesia alone, has provided for this entire international syndicate. It is just, it's flabbergasting. I don't know any other way to describe it.
And so let's talk about that for just a second. Let's look at, do you have off the top of your head, Mike, the value like in 1970 of gold?
No, but I could look it up real quick while you're talking.
All right. So his point, just to clarify for everybody, in the 1960s, which is where we're kind of at in the book right now, with JFK and Dulles going at it, and the securing of Indonesia, and then in the 1965-66 timeframe, the coupping, so that they then could secure the gold, because none of this could happen until they had the gold under a corrupt dictator installed by the CIA, right? So this is all coming up. As that occurs, you have the election of the 1968 election, right? So 1966 is 1965, 1966 is the coupping of Indonesia. They're going to install Suharto. Once they do that, the CIA has secured through Sullivan and Cromwell, and Freeport, the mining capability. And it's going to take them a couple of years to start pulling the gold out. So the 1968 election happens, and I've written extensively about this. I've provided all of the details. We saw the murdering, assassination of RFK because he could not be allowed to win because he's of the same mold that JFK is. And they have this plan that they are going to not only steal all of this gold, they are going to unpeg the US dollar from the gold, which is going to make the price of gold go from like $35 to whatever to, you know, $1,000. And it's going to explode. So for every $35 coin, they're now setting on $1,000 worth or whatever that number is as it keeps going up. And so they turned a mountain worth of gold that may have been $1 billion into a $1 trillion mountain just by the simple act of Richard Nixon decoupling the US dollar from the gold. They did it overnight. So Mike, go ahead.
The gold price in 1970 closed at $38.90, and right now it's sitting at $2,584.
But even look at like 1980. What was it in 1980? Because if I'm not mistaken, they if I'm not mistaken, they decoupled it around 1972. Because Nixon does that. He runs for re-election in 1972. He gets reelected in the biggest landslide ever. And then he's set up by the CIA.
By 1980, gold had shot up to $850 an ounce.
Yeah. Okay. So again, do the math. I don't do math in public. $40 to $800.
It's effectively a 20x in a decade.
Yeah. So they turned $1 billion investment into $1 trillion investment. It's crazy. All along, go ahead.
Hi, Colonel. I just wanted to mention, I think this, you've mentioned this before, but it's worth bearing in mind in talking about West Germany. Earlier, you briefly mentioned it, like, you know, the two folks who were most in charge of running West Germany, as you've repeatedly mentioned, Alan Dulles put in Reinhard Gehlen and the BND, their CIA, and the other guy is, you know, High Commissioner of Germany is John J. McCloy. So those are the two guys, you know, who students of the Warren Commission, and I would refer specifically to the book called Breach of Trust, published by University of Kansas Press in 2005. It's those guys are running the Warren Commission, right?
Yes.
So the two paperclippiest dudes, the two closest to Alan Dulles, one of whom was Alan Dulles, but John J. McCloy, you know, I know you've mentioned him repeatedly, is known as the chairman on Wall Street. So and their water boy on the Warren Commission is Congressman Gerald Ford. You know, he's like doing all of he's like the water boy of Dulles and McCloy. And, you know, Jim Eugenio refers to them as the Troika in the sense of, like, you know, day one, they reject Earl Warren's choice for, you know, the all-important chief counsel, which is the steering wheel of the whole thing, and put in their own guy named Rankin. And so basically, you know, if anyone had any doubts about when Betty Ford hit the wild turkey, you know, Gerald Ford in particular placed, in the final commission of like 3 days before the final report of the Warren Commission comes out, he changes the wording so that it can align with Arlen Specter's, crazy, insane magic bullet theory, right?
Right.
And he doesn't tell anyone else on the Warren Commission. So basically, the Warren Commission itself comes right out of Operation Paperclip in West Germany. And that's so important to remember, that connection. Yeah.
So what I want to mention is the guy that we just looked up, the Lucian Clay. McCloy replaced Lucian Clay as the guy that was running Germany in the aftermath of World War II. So just to put that piece together, that's who he's talking about. So he was instrumental in setting up Operation Gladio, McCloy was.
Yep.
So
in writing the Warren Commission with Alan Dulles, it should have been called the Dulles Commission.
It should have been called the cover up. Yeah.
Yes.
Lumi, did you have something you wanted to say? You asked for a mic.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Like always, you absolutely crush it. The gold thing is interesting because, I've seen this to this modern day. It's happening right now in Haiti with their gold, which
Yes.
it was discovered. And everyone talks about Haiti, but no one realizes that there's just one gentleman who actually pretty much controls the whole of the Caribbean from Florida, who's wanted by Canada for money laundering and gun smuggling, right? But America gives him asylum pretty much because basically he controls the whole of the Caribbean. So this whole system of control is like, it makes perfect sense to me. And thank you for exposing it. Maybe it's like in 1930, but the same playbook, the same play is being used today, one way or another.
So the Haiti thing, and we have covered that when we did talk about Haiti and the coups that has went there. For those of you who were not around during that time, there was a gold mine discovered in Haiti to the tune of $20 billion as a first guess on the value of it. And the mining company that was given the concession illegally, unconstitutionally, from a corrupt Haitian government that the CIA helped to bring about in one of their many coups of the Haitian government, had the point man was Hillary Clinton's brother. He was the guy that was down in Haiti running the op in making sure that this particular Canadian mining company got the concession for Haiti. And it is against Haitian's constitution to have foreigners mine their resources because back in the day, they had decided that all of the foreign mining that they knew about had left the country in ruins. And so a domestic company can do it, a foreign company cannot. And so what the unrest in Haiti has all been about is to create the biggest hellhole in the world, because what happens when they do that is eventually they can make the people suffer so much that they cry out for a CIA installed dictator without a parliament, which is what they want, so that the CIA dictator will then institute a new constitution that will allow this Canadian mining company to come in and destroy their country by mining that gold.
Even more like perfect than that, you nailed it, because there's that one side of the coin. But then say, for instance, every corporation on the island, every bank, every business, say they are owned by this one other asset who is a CIA agent who is now in America. It means that whatever happens, that country will never escape its economic problems and has no resources guaranteed then to escape it if you capture its now found gold. So like, this is like the perfect playbook they've used again and again. And I just sent you the name of the gentleman because, I don't want to say his name anymore on Spaces because I kind of started getting in trouble. And I feel like maybe he is a CIA asset, and the reason why they do it is exactly for that, perpetual poverty and then human labor, because then all these people are coming over to America and we're financing it through our own government spending. It's actually crazy when you think about it. So
Gilbert Biglio. How do you
You never heard him, but the Biglio almost sounds like bingo. I'm no joke. Once I found out who he was, look into it. He was best friends with Epstein. He bought Jeffrey Epstein's car, his Mercedes, from him. He is the key to everything, in my opinion. And the fact that he's sitting in Florida when Canada wants him for money laundering and arms smuggling just means that he is an American asset, in my opinion. Because otherwise, how has he not been? It just makes no sense to me.
So he is Haitian's only billionaire, which tells you he's on the CIA take. Because you do not become a billionaire in Haiti unless you are in bed with the CIA. He is involved in arms trafficking, human rights violations, and basically the de facto leader of Haiti's Jewish community and an honorary consul to Israel. Biggio's name appeared in the 2021 Pandora Papers leak of secret offshore company documents by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. In an accounting document of the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, he was revealed to be the buyer of Mercedes at a price of $132,000. Says that he's living in Miami. He also has a house in Switzerland, and he has many offshore companies, which of course we know is exactly how they operate. He's originally from Aleppo. Oh gosh, that's just classic, isn't it? Let's see, that's modern day Syria for those of you who aren't geography scholars. Says that while he comes from a Sephardic Jewish family, he is not religious, which means he's probably sold his soul, but does own the only Sefer Torah in Haiti and participates in Jewish holidays. Let's see.
It's interesting, right? I mean, I stumbled across this guy.
There's so many, there's so many that I've stumbled across in this journey of Operation Gladio, people just like him. Yeah, so we'll have to, this GB group, which is his conglomerate, do you know anything about it?
I mean, I just started doing my research. Like,
okay.
I found out about this guy 5 days ago by chance from a guy in Haiti, literally, very educated young man who was saying why he really doesn't like America. And he was saying, look, if America was serious about ending the pain in Haiti, they would find this guy immediately in Florida and extradite him to Canada. But and that turned on a signal in my head. I was like, all right, this guy's protected then. And then I started looking into it, and I was like, yeah, he's the key to the whole of the Caribbean.
So he has the monopoly on steel in the Haitian market. He has a refining plant for edible oil, which means he's poisoning everybody. He also has an exclusive wood dealership there, and property development in other Caribbean areas, consumer goods, he basically has a monopoly on like the manufacturing of soap, detergent, margarine, all of the shit made from the oil, killing people. He also has the energy, operating a network of 200 gas stations throughout the Caribbean, in Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and St. Martin. Oh my God, look at that. All of the places that the CIA has couped: the Dominican Republic, Jamaica. I haven't done St. Martin yet, but I do know there's a lot of fake banks down there that work with the CIA. The GB group sold to Group Financier National. It's 50% stake in a particular distributor of integrated oil and gas in Haiti. Oh, and of course he owns the telecommunications. So that means that he's the spy guy for the CIA. So you guys notice.
No, he owns everything. Like,
yeah.
This is what this guy was trying to tell me. Like, he literally, even the funerals, like, so he makes money from everything, from the beginning to the end of the life. And then when people want to have a better life and they leave, he owns them, because through the NGOs, there's something going on, he was trying to say, on how these people are getting to Ohio and getting a car, right? How do you get a driver's license and a car, right? Without, there's the whole process. So once you start to look into this guy, he is like, there is a reason how all these people are getting to freaking Ohio. And
yeah,
it's all going to become clear. Like, I really feel like, thank you for like looking into this and even like entertaining this, because I've said this to 10 big journalists on this platform. No one will touch this with a pole. No one even spoke about it more than 2 minutes. So thank you for talking about it.
Hey, I mean, this is what we're doing. This is the type of syndicate people. We call it the international syndicate. These are the people. They're all hidden. And that's what I said a year ago when we first started this. Bridget can attest to that. When we first started this, I told them that the people that are controlling this are names you've never heard of. If you've heard of them, they're distractions. They are not the people that are really controlling this international syndicate. And the interesting part about this, though, I do want to highlight this because we look for patterns. Telecommunications is one of the key assets in all of these countries. You remember we talked about ITT back in the telegraph days. ITT was pre-World War II, World War II. It eventually turns into AT&T. All 100% of the way, CIA. ITT went around the world and installed telegraph capability in these countries and then turned over the information to the State Department via a spy network. They then upgraded into the telephone. They went in and put entire telephone infrastructure in these countries, turned every ounce of it over to then the CIA. Same thing with cell phones. They turn it all over, as we've seen here in the United States, to the CIA. These are patterns. And if you tell me who owns the telecommunications in a particular country, especially if the country has been cooed by the CIA, I will tell you who's complicit in the cooing of that country, because it'll be the person that owns the telecommunication. It's a pattern. Lord Interweb, go ahead. Miles.
This conversation about the gold is really interesting. So that begs the question, so why won't they tap into our reserves? Do they feel that they can't cover their tracks, so they have to go to other countries and steal their gold? Because I do think we have a lot of gold to be mined in this country.
Well, first of all, who's we? You're talking about the CIA. The CIA can't go mine our gold. So these corrupt people are taking the, so it, I would believe that, first of all, we don't even know how much gold we actually have.
A second, CIA can't do operations on American soil, right?
Oh, they do it all the time. And
they're not meant to, but yeah.
They're not meant to do any of this shit. But yeah, so they operate here all the time. I mean, the entire Cuban exile program was operated out of Miami. They are Gladio operators, and they're a trained assassin. They were trained to torture people. They were trained to overthrow governments. They were 100% trained in the United States. They were part of the Watergate. So they operated inside at the direction of the CIA. They were part of the Kennedy assassination. They were part of the gunning down of the former ambassador from Chile. They operate inside the United States all the time. I mean, I would go so far as to say, if patterns hold true, that both of the assassinations attempts on Trump will lead you back to the CIA, as did the 4 soft coups. Every one of them involved CIA assets. They
Well,
want.
do you think then this is why they're not like charging this guy with terrorism law, like terror laws and stuff like that, and they're not even trying to like make it so that he doesn't have a lawyer? Because I mean, like the Jam 6 guys, they absolutely got put in a hole, but this guy seems to have a lawyer already.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. He is protected. He was part of a mission. And again, I'm just basing it off of patterns. Every time something like this happens, there is a pattern that has been developed over the last year and a half of us researching Operation Gladio. And they do this all over the world. If they do it all over the world, what the hell do you think they wouldn't do it here? Of course they would. And oh, by the way, just because they can't operate here, I have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they dress up in military uniforms and pretend they're in the military. CIA agents, they dress up like FBIs and have FBI badges and pretend to be FBI. They dress up like DEA agents and pretend they're DEA. They dress up like IRS agents and pretend they're IRS agents. They come into an organization at the upper echelons. And one of the biggest recent examples is the chick that was at the Secret Service. She, after 27 years of being in the Secret Service, takes a quote unquote retirement and goes and works at PepsiCo. We have clearly established PepsiCo was part of the taking down of Allende. They paid money to Nixon, who was president at the time. ITT, PepsiCo, and Freeport, the same Freeport that we're talking about today, paid the administration money, and Richard Nixon ordered the CIA to assassinate Allende. And, you know, they did it. He's dead. They first paid him to jeopardize the election, to try to ensure he didn't get elected. And when that failed and he got elected, they tried to buy the senators to not confirm his election because they have like a parliamentary system. And when that failed, they couldn't find enough to buy off. It was at that point that they said, all right, screw it. Kill the general. They did. Kill the president. They did. And install Pinochet. Tens of thousands of dead bodies later. They have Freeport, ITT, and PepsiCo has the monopoly on food products and beverages in Chile for, you know, decades after that.
And also, in the end of her investigation, like congressional meeting, she was saying that she was using her personal phone to communicate with people, and that's literally the last thing she said.
Yep.
Before she was no longer allowed to speak, when they should have actually brought her back again and said, what do you mean personal phone? We want to see everything, make this public and transparent, because obviously there's collusion here, like Hillary's freaking emails.
Yes, every bit of it. But I'm going to the patterns, and all of these patterns all indicate to me, and that's why when I find, we have been, since you're fairly new with us, we've been going around the world looking at all of the countries and all of the CIA activity in all of these countries. When we find new stuff, like you just mentioned this guy, we will go back and visit one of the countries that we've already done and put in perspective the new pieces of information, because as you go through the other countries, you pick up more interesting details and more people who oftentimes spill back over into countries you've already researched. So it's kind of an evolving process that we're going through. Shannon, go ahead.
Hey, Colonel, how are you?
Good. I'm great. How are you?
Okay, I'm my heart's palpitating right now. I am furious. The engineering company I work for, you know, Davy International, Davy Canada Incorporated, that I work with like 5+ years. My skin's boiling. Guess who one of our top clients was besides Rio Tinto? Freeport. Freaking Freeport.
Yes, they're criminals.
I am furious right now because I was actually their marketing manager for Davy. So I wrote all the winning like proposals and stuff like that when we got these contracts for the EPCM, which is the Engineering Procurement Construction Management, right?
Yep.
And I would be involved with assisting with the hiring, working with the HR manager for like staffing and them getting their vexes and any kind of cultural things. And I am not kidding you. Other than the so-called miscellaneous, which we know bribe money that was always put into these deals, I had no flipping clue that I can tell you, I think I got a cartel list on our client list. I'm not kidding. Like, Colonel, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go through, because I told you Davy International Incorporated, which one of the head offices was in U.S. out of San Ramon, Davy San Ramon, and we were Davy Canada Incorporated. Our umbrella company was Trafalgar. You know, they built the bridge in London. And just dirty, right? And I am now thinking, I'm like going, I wrote the proposals to win these contracts. Of course, not realizing that they were raping and pillaging the land. I just sent you some data on Freeport regarding their 50 plus years of exploitation of the land in Indonesia, of the mountainside, carving it out. I am like shaking. I'm so furious right now. I think I work for a cartel. I think my engineering, consulting engineering company that I work for was like flipping like a syndicate arm of these clients, right?
Yep.
And I'm gonna dig into that for sure. I also have a piece. I'm actually working on a post right now regarding the two CIA ops agents that I've got proof they were BlackRock connected. They both of them, the shooters, Matthew Crooks and Ryan Ruth, Routh, both were involved with BlackRock commercials. So you've got MK Ultra going on here and the whole pansy thing. So I just want to add to you that they were also connected to the BlackRock as well.
Yeah, I saw them, the commercial that they were both in. It's
both in. So I'm writing a post on that, you know, and I'm a receipt girl, so I gotta have receipts. So over to you on this, but I'm literally shaking right now. Like, did I work for this engineering company that I well respected, and I won proposals for them, you know? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like I almost feel like complicit.
No, I mean, but we all did what we did. I mean, I was 30 years in the military too. We all did what we did with what we thought were honorable people. They just weren't all. And the majority of the people that work for Freeport have no clue. The majority of the people that are contractors for Freeport have no clue. The same thing with the military.
You know, like, I can honestly tell you, Steve Harapiak is one of our key. He's like a world star mining engineer. And when I would debrief him to clean up his, what they call the bush language before he would go speak in front of the clients, you know, he would always have these comments of like, now they make sense. Like looking back, now they're like Gladio making sense, like strategy of tension, you know, slave labor, stay behind units. Like it's all making sense now. Because he would say language like, you know, like we take the labor as young and cheap as we can get them. So probably we're involved with trafficking, right? And I would hear him. And so I definitely think the senior mining engineers that are like boots on the ground, they definitely knew what was going on.
Oh, absolutely. They did. Yeah.
They turned a blind eye.
Yeah.
You know, and I had such high respect for these senior project managers. And now it's just like, I just have such a bad taste in my mouth right now, you know, but I'm literally shaking.
Yeah.
I'm so upset, you know.
I understand it.
I feel so complicit.
But you're not. You're not. None of us are. And the whole reason we're here is to figure out what they are doing and to hold them accountable. That's why we're here. We can only do that with information. And now what the most important part of this is turning this information into action, and that is holding our representatives accountable. When you go to town halls, you go armed with this information and you demand they defund the CIA. And if they want any information about why that's required for them to defund the FBI, to defund the CIA, you tell them that the FBI has become the Vietnam Phoenix program, and I can give you point by point by point. We went over it last week. I have posts about it. The PICC is fusion centers. The and I went step by step so that you guys can have the information to confront your elected leaders and hold them accountable. We have been, all of this information is in about 50 or 100 different places. I'm the focal point in funneling it into a narrative that you guys can use with your elected representatives, and then you demand action. And more importantly, I think, because I think President Trump is going to do most of this heavy lifting when he gets back in office, it's going to be up to us and everybody on these spaces and in my Rumble audience to go to the town hall meetings, to go to civic groups and walk people through why we have to stick by President Trump and talk to them, like talk them down. Oh my God, he's a dictator. No, he's not. Here's what has happened. Here's what's going on. And you're going to see the accountability. Anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you. I just cooled down with that statement, but I literally was feeling like I needed to take a shower.
All right. Well, I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
You know. So anyhow, I'm going to keep digging and everything like that. But I literally feel like the consulting company I worked with, weren't as pristine as I thought they were.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
thank you, Shannon. Thank you.
As always, knocking it out of the park, Colonel.
Thank you. Shane, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I saw my buddy Mike Hobart near, and I was like, "Yeah, this sounds like an interesting space." He's always great for a very in-depth discussion. Shannon, I heard you talking there, and I couldn't help but think back to when I felt fairly guilty about what I was doing overseas as well. And I had just gotten off the battlefield. I think it was about December of 2004. We came out of Fallujah, and one of the books I found in my tent with my guides was a book by a guy named John Taylor Gatto, and it's The Underground History of American Education. If anybody's still struggling with this kind of stuff, where you feel guilty about having worked for the cabal, basically, go read some of his work. You were indoctrinated. You were taken away from your home under truancy laws, most of us anyway, at 5 years old, and you were indoctrinated with weapons-grade military indoctrination. And
100%.
A lot of us, especially the ones that grew up in the Midwest and the South, you believe red, white, and blue, and they perverted that along the way. There's an entire generation that needs to literally let this go. I mean, you didn't stand a chance, and they knew that if they didn't get their hands on you at 5 years old and indoctrinate you for the first 13 years, and then maybe send you off to the military or further indoctrination at higher education, that was a losing thing, a losing battle, and it all comes from 1700s progressive Prussia. If you guys don't know the history of what that system was, 1700s progressive Prussia leads right into everything we talk about with the Bolshevik Revolution, the entire Nazi, socialist, communist revolutions and wars from World War I to World War II over there. So you really you got to let this go. You got to heal, and then you got to get back on the mission out there and go after these guys, because that's what it's going to take from every stinking one of us that have been in these shoes. We owe another generation. What our legacy is going to be is making sure this doesn't happen to our kids and our grandkids.
Absolutely. And so one of the things I just want to capitalize on what you said, I've done a lot of research into the education process. And if you guys were talking about Rockefeller earlier, and how the Allen Dulles and Sullivan and Cromwell and all of that. Well, Rockefeller had a sister who funded the SEL project under a nonprofit called Castle, and that's social emotional learning. And that has been in effect, unbeknownst to most of us, for decades and decades and decades. It goes back to some of the original thought leaders in that process was as early as the 1950s and 60s. And so all of us grew up in basically a science project for these assholes. And they have manipulated us 100% of the time. They stole our education process from us by feeding us. And remember where we talked about Robert Maxwell owning the printing presses in England? We had the exact same thing here. The educational resources are all filtered to tell you a story, not the story. My entire agenda is to go back and reanalyze everything under the auspices of reality. Operation Gladio changes everything. When you understand the depravity of these people and what they have done and co-opted every aspect of our life, you can then look at everything in a completely different light. They've lied to us about every war. They've lied to us about who the good guys and the bad guys are. All they did, and you can use the exact same terminology that we used on a battlefield. They lays a target, and if that target is President Allende, then they label him as a communist. And we've been psychologically programmed. Remember having to get under your desk for the nuclear fallout drills? We have been psychologically programmed like a dog in the Pavlov's practices to respond viscerally to the mention of communism. And that's the reason why that was so deadly. They are doing it right now with this generation of domestic terror. They're calling people domestic terrorists in order to do the exact same thing. We went through it with Islamic terrorists. They have to have a boogeyman. And once they identify the boogeyman, then everybody that they don't like, regardless of whether they're good or bad, get lazed with a target. And when they laze them with a target, they are going to destroy them. So this is, as Shane just articulated, this is a military grade operation that they are conducting, not just in the United States, but all around the world. So anyway, Carrie, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. Do you know, Colonel, about the Attorneys General guidelines of 2008?
You're going to have to be more specific. I know you come on here every day trying to stump me.
No, I'm not.
Go ahead. Tell me what it is.
That's the question. I can just say blah, blah, and not ask you what I'm not trying to stump you. Oh my God.
You have to be more specific.
Okay, so in that 2008 guideline, which not every attorney general makes a guideline, they lay out that the FBI has to report to the CIA. And I posted in the bill the whole guidelines. It's, it's not really long. But so when you say that they dress up as CIA, no, there's no differentiation. And remember the other day we were talking about world.
Well, hold on, Carrie. Hold on. I'm going to correct you. They do infiltrate. They have put CIA agents in the FBI. I'm not talking about a reporting chain, and I'm aware of the fact that attorney generals issue standards. But when somebody comes to your house and they have an FBI badge and they say they work for the FBI when they're actually a CIA agent, they are actually employed by the CIA. In addition, they take contractors to the CIA and they have them hired by the FBI. And they are put in particular positions at the discretion of the CIA, and they partake in CIA missions. For example, in foreign embassies, you have people that are actually employed by the CIA posing as FBI. And then they go in there and they do investigations and they come out and influence reports that are written in these foreign countries to alter policies and procedures inside the United States. And they are actually CIA agents. So yes, they do that.
I know they do that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they're consolidating power. So we think of FBI and CIA as differentiated, but through this guideline, legally, it no longer is structured that way.
Well, I'll have to look at that.
That's my understanding.
Okay, I'll look at that.
And you remember I was telling you about John McNeil, who 3 weeks before World Trade Center blew up, got a job there as head of
Right.
security.
Yep.
And he was former FBI. He was, you know, there's a long story about him, but he was going against the CIA, basically, in terms of bin Laden. And one of the things that he was hitting was that structure of the CIA actually being the FBI. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm the FBI. And there was power struggle there. Anyway, he was 2000, you know, in 2000, but in 2008, they solved that problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else? We're creeping right up to our 6 o'clock time frame. Nobody? SR 71?
Thank you, Colonel, and I appreciate everything that you do for this space. Everything. You, Bridget, Cousin Ed, and everybody that participates. I will say that I am honored to be a co-host. And I am in training, folks, so things will go wrong. Don't happen, believe me. I've been known to make mistakes, and I made quite a few.
Well,
Bear with me, and we're all in this for the learning experience. And Colonel, you just put it in a way that, what's that saying? Tell me like a 3-year-old can understand.
right. And one of the things I do want to make sure people understand, the co-host has something that's not completely visible to our regulars in here. You guys have seen every once in a while, one of the weirdo bot people will get through. And they come up and do whatever they do. These guys are constantly, as people enter the room, they are clicking on their profiles and they are making sure that they're not what we judge to be, and we have some things that we look at, weirdos. You look at several of their posts as you go down, and if they don't belong in this room, we don't let them in this room because we don't want people disrupting what I mean, I view this as basically a history lesson every day of us sharing, and then we open it up for comments so you guys can introduce new aspects in addition, as we've seen done here today, the addition of the guy in Haiti. That's what this whole thing is all about, is collective learning. And we don't want people in here disrupting that. And so they do a lot of work behind the scenes. So being a co-host isn't like just hanging out and selecting buttons on who get to speak and who doesn't. There is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. So I'm eternally grateful for Cousin It, Bridget, in their research, SR 71. Bridget's going to be in and out over the next couple of weeks. So we needed an alternative person, in SR 71 stepped up to the plate and volunteered to do that. So kudos to you for doing that, SR 71. We greatly appreciate it. Lord Interweb, go ahead. You're the last one.
Well, why do you let me in here? Do you feel sorry for me?
No, obviously, you are part of this learning. You ask very probing questions and you add quite a bit to the overall content. Obviously, because you also host spaces. The broad reach I wish actually more hosts of spaces could talk fluently about Operation Gladio to their audience so that everybody understood what it was. I was thrilled to see another space host here. Shane Hazel, for those of you guys who don't know, has a much bigger following than we do. So him coming in and checking it out was huge. And, you know, coming up and offering his input, that's kind of what we want. We want people to understand what we're doing and send people our way so we can educate everybody. And the biggest thing to me is the biggest takeaway of all of this, and Bridget normally says this, is that we put all of this material together and we post it for you guys to take it back and do your own research. I don't want anyone taking my word for this. I want you to look over the material. And as Mike was saying, he's reading basically the same book. I have people DM me all the time about what book to buy next. They're all in different phases of the research that we've already went through. And I know I owe you guys the reading list, which I will post. I am working on that. I just got my books all organized out in my cottage in order to be able to do it, because what I did was I went back and I just finished it today, and sectioned it off on the ones that we've done book reviews on, so that I can post them and put a link there for you to go look at those videos for them. And then I also have ones that I've not done book reviews, but I would like to do book reviews on. And then I also have a list of ones that are relevant to Operation Gladio, but I have not read yet. And I want to give those to you so that those of you who want to read ahead, you can kind of go into the ones that I haven't read, you know, because some of you might be faster readers than me. But anyway, Bridget, closing thoughts?
Just want to thank everybody for coming in. Repost, 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 repost. We are being shadow banned as always. Not whining, just saying. It's kind of bragging, actually, anymore. It's kind of one of those labels, you know. It's like, you know, yeah, I'm good with that. So repost, you guys do break through the algorithm, and we see it, and it's cool. When you guys go out and hashtag Operation Gladio, tag Colonel, and it goes to this interaction algorithm thingy, and like I said, it does break through, and it's awesome.
So
we are pushing the needle. People are actually, you know, we're getting more and more where people are mentioning Gladio now. Big account.
Well, and that's just basically what happened this morning. I was in the chat on a Badlands show, and when they recognized that I was there, they were talking about Venezuela, knew that there was a Gladio aspect to it. And, you know, basically CanCon DM'd me and gave me a link to be on their show. I was on the show this morning, one of their news shows. And that is because of the ability to take all of the information that you guys have also brought to this forum and share it with everybody. I could not have done any of this without you guys. Presenting it, getting your feedback on it. That's the reason why I moved from Rumble to here. So I could actually talk to you guys. I can get the feedback one-on-one from the comprehension of the material. I know whether or not we're making progress. Being in the live chat on Rumble, which I love, and a lot of people like being on Rumble, and I'm glad for posterity purposes that that's there. But having the interaction one-on-one, hopefully someday Rumble will have that. I treasure that because of the learning. I was an instructor on on active duty for 3.5 years. I know what the whole learning process is all about. And that's vital for me as the conveyor of the information. But one of the things I do want to say about what Bridget said is I'm just going to share with you guys some information. When I was sitting at, we collectively, Bridget, Cousinette, and I talked. Bridget has since upgraded her X account, but we decided early on that I would be kind of the lead account, and that most of the information that the three of us find comes out through my account. And obviously, there is money involved to a small extent, which allows us to compensate ourselves for the books that we are in the effort that we are putting into this. It doesn't even cover the books. Trust me. Trust me. My husband now is convinced that I have an addiction to the purchasing of these books, but that's a whole nother story. I have a problem. Exactly. But so let's just say, what I have noticed is when we first started doing this, back when we had 2,000, 3,000 followers, we're up to over 20,000 followers. And I have less interaction with 20,000 followers, according to X, than I did when I had 3,000. So if
And
you,
it's a bold-faced lie, because
yes, I mean, I can barely keep up. I do try to read all of your responses. If you guys actually put words to, if you repost something that I post with words, you will see that I go through and I like them. I keep track of what you guys are saying. You guys put vital information out there, and I will not miss it. Having said that, obviously that takes a lot of time. But I think it's vital to this process of learning for me to have you guys' feedback. But we are actively, I don't know what they're doing, but the small amount of quote unquote ad revenue that I am able to share, and I share 100% of it with Bridget and Liza. That was a collective agreement that we made going into this. And the little bit that we have has, I'm telling you, we made twice as much at the very beginning with 3,000 followers. It's ridiculous what they are doing. I don't do it for the money, just so that you guys understand that. And I rarely even talk about this. But I do think it's important that you guys understand the significance of what we're doing and the information that we are sharing, because someone obviously does not like it, for whatever that's worth.
they're waging a psychological war on your account in an attempt, this is my opinion, and I'm just saying this is an opinion, in order to make you think that your reach is that limited. Because as a delegate on the account, I've been able to see the responses, and it is what they're claiming is literally impossible.
Right.
And the only logical explanation I can come up with is that it is a psychological warfare to make you think that you're being disappeared.
Well, if that's their, if I don't personally think that, Bridget, and I appreciate that feedback. I understand how you can come to that conclusion, but if that's their goal, they are sadly failing at that, because,
Amen.
and they know it. I mean, every day I get up between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like already reading. I'm already doing the research from something that someone shared the day before. Like, I'm gonna go tear this guy up that we learned about today. So in Haiti. So
I want to give you some advice, Carol.
Sure.
So I've been looking through for, you seem like they're suppressing your reach. And so I'm going to ask everyone in the audience right now to do this one simple thing. Go on to Colonel and Bridget and these very important accounts, I'd say, and turn on notifications. It's really, really important, because how the algorithm works is that whenever you go into any space and speak, it means that it will start to send out notifications. But most importantly, when you're being suppressed, no one will get your posts if you're being suppressed without notifications. Next thing I want to say for everyone to do is that, look, out of all of the people I know in this whole world of spaces, Colonel's the only person who's mentioned this guy more than twice or three times. That to me means that you want the truth. No one else even wants to know the truth, which is the scariest thing to me, because it's like, look, if you don't want to look into it, then what are we living in? What do we do? It's a ton of notifications. I pay very close attention, and whatever you do, retweeting is good, but if you do a quote post, it changes the algorithm. So if you write your 2 cents on a retweet, it's much better. It gives out about 15% on average return for that post, right? There's so many little things with the algorithm. And election time, avoiding the words Trump, Biden, you name it, all these words are going to get you censored, right? But using the right words to still convey the point is important. So they're using the targeting words as well. They've been doing this for a while, but until everything's over, they ain't going to stop with targeting words. So, and then the last thing I could say is that basically create a community. I don't know if you have one in the actual communities on X, but you get 3 or 4 times the payout when you have a community. And I think that you should just call your community something to do with truth, real truth, something like that. Because basically, once people figure out you're one of the few people who are talking about, like, Operation Gladio, you're the person who got me onto this whole thing. But then I already knew tons about the banking and the finance and the technology and you name it, all the other stuff, because of just my life, right? But once you gave me that one piece, I started seeing everything else. What you need to do is build a community around you, make a beachhead, start to get the money coming in so you can get the research going, figure out alternative ways to advertise your space, because no one's going to do you any favors, because apparently no one wants you to talk. This is all I can say.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you. And Bridget, take that as a task. Bridget's our IT piece. And we will definitely do that. I think Hidden History, that was like one of the very first books I ever read that started me on this Gladio trail. I do think the intrigue of using a term like hidden history is a great idea, because inquiring minds will definitely look into things like that. So thank you, Lumi, for that recommendation. Lord, go ahead.
Are we experiencing a digital Operation Phoenix?
I don't want to get overly dramatic. I mean, I think Operation Phoenix is such a horrific thing. I would not use those words. I do believe that, and part of me obviously wants to believe that X is kind of that bastion of free speech, but I'm just telling you guys what I'm observing in the fact that we went from, in fairly short order, 3,000 to 20,000, and there's been decreasing shares of revenue that corresponds to that. And again, we're not talking about a lot of money. We're talking about $100. It is not a lot of money. It, to me, is an index. And obviously, I use a lot of Cousin It and Bridget's time feeding me information to be able to put out the content that we do. And I would love to be able to do something more for them. Not even for me. You guys are already paying my retirement with your taxes. This is more about what I can help them with as we go down this, because I do believe that even after Trump comes back, our most vital role will be providing these types of information forums to everybody, and giving you guys the tools to go educate and school your representatives to get their ass on board with whatever it is that's coming down the pike. So I don't see it going away for the next couple of years. I'm in it for the long haul. So I'm here regardless. But there's just a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Like, my daughter just spent an entire day going through, and I pay my daughter for the work that she does. but I pay it out of my pocket. She just went through the entire YouTube channel that we set up for the Colonel's Corner, putting thumbnails on all of the videos so you don't see my face every time one of the videos comes up. She did, for all of the book reviews, she did these thumbnail sketches of the book cover with the name. It looks, if go over and look to YouTube and look at the page. It's amazing what she did. She's going to start working on the Rumble channel and basically do the same thing. And that was a suggestion from Magadai 1776. If you guys are not following her, please do. She's the one that took the Gladio glasses to GART for us and gathered up a donation that I was able to share with Cousin It and Bridget from the people that all went to the Badlands meetup in South Dakota. So this is a team effort. This is everybody. She's going through and editing some of the videos for us because she's an IT person. Again, I told her I don't have any money to pay you, but she's doing it as a volunteer. So anyway, thank you all for being.
I want to say I've seen during this year, I've seen a few very medium-sized accounts, 10,000 accounts go to 1 million a few times because of what you just said, which is grassroots researching, very, very unique topics which no one's covering. And when people finally figure out what you're doing, there's no substitute for it, because real people like myself will be like, yeah, from the beginning, she's been on point with her team. And you'll be surprised. Like, I'm just saying right now, though, the real secret is to keep that enthusiasm once you get bigger. Because, I mean, in like a few years from now, you've got to have that same appetite you have like now.
Well, anybody that knows me for the last, and that's the reason why, by the way, that I use Colonel Towner Watkins. My name legally is Colonel Watkins. I have a wonderful husband, but the name that everybody knew me in the military for the preponderance of my 30 years was under Towner. And anybody that ever worked for me over the last 30 years knows the one thing that anybody would say, enthusiasm probably isn't the right word, like a tired old dog or something like that. Once I get on to something, so my sermon to NCOs for my entire 30 years in the military was persistence. That is what I was known for. That if anyone ever asked me the key to leadership, the key to success is persistence. That is the one thing that I kind of, the feather, if I had a feather in my cap, that would be it. So you don't have to worry about me not being here or me losing the enthusiasm. I spent 30 years fighting for my country, willing to die for my country. And I'm here to make sure my country turns out what I thought it was the entire time for my brand new grandbaby.
This is the most beautiful thing I've heard in my life, because this is why everyone in this room is here. And it doesn't matter if you're a colonel, the wife of a colonel, or just a peasant like me. The point is that we want to hand over something which we know is a beautiful freaking country, right? And this is where, like, every single operation you go through and every little thing you do is like almost a stone in the shoe to all these guys. And they're going to want to kind of silence you. So you've got to be ready for that as well.
Oh, trust me, I am. As a matter of fact, for those of you who are new, I take this literally deadly serious. I am well protected and I am prepared. But I also never lose my sense of humor, nor does my husband's, and he keeps me grounded in all of this. But those of you who've been here for a while have heard me say this. My husband's saying anytime we go to dinner with someone, this obviously comes up because I live and breathe this stuff. So they're like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I've been doing well, you know." Kind of like they're rhetorically asking, "How are you?" And I'd launch into Operation Gladio. But anyway, so inevitably at the end of the dinner, conversation, whatever event, they will turn to my husband and go, "What the hell?" don't you think that, the security, somebody's going to be after her, whatever? And my husband said, yeah, long ago, I stopped walking between her and a window. So we don't lose our sense of humor, but I do understand that we are a growing pebble in the shoe of quite a few people. But I will say this also, all of this information that we're bringing to you, it's all out there. I just don't think anybody has collectively, to the extent that we have, there's someone more that is smarter than I am about any one facet of this. But what I think has happened is they're smarter in this facet or this facet or this facet. But
got it. They've been
yes,
compartmentalized into oblivion. But
yes,
the amount of information out there means that whatever, if you're looking for that one name like before, you're never going to come across it unless it's like the one guy from Haiti who's educated and his dad's dad was like someone important. So he literally was like, well, this is the guy. You know what I mean? There was no way I was ever going to find it. The point is that this is how all information is. It's all out there for us to find. It's just impossible because there's a matrix of information and we're all compartmentalized into oblivion. However, if someone like you is breaking down the compartmentalization by bringing experts and people who know something, eventually everything which is known is going to be known. And you've got the Tower of Babel kind of thing, because we can literally now with any language you can communicate. So there is no stopping the pebble in their shoe.
Right.
It's really going to get painful for them soon.
And yeah, sorry, the only thing I want to add for the Colonel, because she's quite humble, is when you got Wikipedia associating Operation Gladio to the Colonel here, you're making it.
Well, since I think Wikipedia is a product of the CIA, I'm not sure I needed to hear that.
Oh, come on now. Remember, we take it over. We're taking it back.
I know, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I'm blaming Bridget. She brought it up. But yeah, that's great to know about the community, and we're on it. So thank you again for helping us help you. I love it. So we will be back here tomorrow at 4. And I appreciate all of you and all your input. Thanks a lot.
Colonel, no runs, no drips, no errors today.
I know. See you later. What is going on? Where's your daddy? Did he leave you in here? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? What are you doing? What are you doing? Your daddy must have left you. Did your daddy leave you? Oh, there he is.